Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's D-Zone Fireside Chat, getting started with OpenTelemetry, planning and tips for adoption. I'm Max Crimpton-Thomas, and I'll be your host. Thanks for joining us. OpenTelemetry is quickly becoming the standard for observability, but many teams still struggle with how to get started, from planning and architecture to migration and identifying the right use cases. Today's conversation is focused on making that process clearer and more practical. I'm joined by two experts from Elastic, Miguel Luna, Principal Product Manager, and David Hope, Product Marketing Director, who work closely with teams adopting OpenTelemetry in real-world environments. Miguel and David, thanks for being here, and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, thanks for the intros there, Max. Appreciate it. So we're going to talk about getting started with OpenTelemetry, just like Max said. I'm David Hope, Director of AI-powered observability solutions at Elastic. As Max said there, have a long history of working in the observability space. I started out as a customer of observability and now moved to the vendor side. Miguel, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. So I'm Miguel Luna. I'm a product manager working in observability for Elastic. My background before Elastic was working with VMware, and I've been deeply involved with cloud native projects and most specifically the CNCF project. So a lot of open source in there, and of course, lately observability with Elastic.
Thanks, Miguel. Right, let's get started with why OpenTelemetry, right? I think these are real quotes from our customers, and you'll see here that there are two really important reasons why they want OpenTelemetry. One is agnosticity. OTel is being seen as the way forward for reducing this vendor lock-in problem where you deployed your agents and they speak their own language. It's proprietary, and they don't really work well with other agents in the ecosystem. That's one reason. And then the other reason is efficiencies, right? People want to collect the data once. They don't want to have to collect it twice and process it twice and do all of the things that need to happen from a data collection and processing and pipelines perspective. So now they can actually centralize that collection, and they can easily send it if they need to multiple backends. Miguel, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, especially like one thing that we tend to see a lot is basically when you go into many, especially on the executive side, you portray there the agnosticity wins. Everybody is sold on this. So everybody wants the agnosticity that OTel provides. The one thing is that, and I think that we should go forward into what exactly OTel provides that is not just being agnostic, because the whole idea of being on OTel is not just about jumping between different backends, but being able to also provide correlation and other things that leverage you into troubleshooting, into getting insights from your system, which is actually why you want to do observability, because it's not just about having the ability to jump between different backends and have interoperability. So one thing that I would like us to discuss, David, and maybe you can, have you seen, for example, the OTel data model?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great segue. So, let's jump into the next slide. OpenTelemetry is not just about collecting data, as you say. To truly unlock its power, you need to preserve and leverage the context layer. And this is where we get into the schema and the semantic conventions, right? I think this shared vocabulary is very, very important for businesses today. Actually having a single language rather than separate languages from different vendors to talk about all your observability data, right? So I think this is an incredibly underrated, I think, aspect of OpenTelemetry, but also, in my opinion, incredibly important, right?
Yeah, I fully agree. Like for me, like actually when people focus so much on the tooling, like when you think about OTel, you have tooling and the specs. The tooling is very important, like the OTel collector and like the SDKs, they're being battle tested, they're being contributed by many folks, and they're powerful. They are a workhorse if you want to refer to it in good terms. But to me, the spec, like you said, is very much underrated. Why? Because when you have semantic conventions, is basically aligning on what we are naming things. So once you have a system that is producing metrics for CPU, then you have a similar system, but it's created by another vendor of that system. And they both decide that they want to call CPU metrics completely different things. That means normalization is going to become a nightmare. And then you want to understand what's going on with your CPUs. And the data is there, but it's just being called differently. Or even worse, it could have a completely different semantics. Then you have you have it on your screen there. You have key things like the resource attributes. The resource attributes are actually a way where we can tag telemetry that is produced by an entity. So this starts creating this concept that I've seen referred on OpenTelemetry of moving away from the pillars, the 3 pillars of traces, metrics, and logs, into having a braid. So when you are able to bundle together, to group these signals, then you start having more of a 360 idea of what's happening with your entities. You're able to see metrics, you're able to see logs, you're able to see traces, and semantic conventions like naming is hard. So who wants to keep doing this like all the time? Let's just agree on what we call things, and we call it. And as long as we have a spec, then everyone's try to do to kind of like be as close as possible to the spec. So I imagine a world where I just bought a new machine that is emitting metrics in an endpoint, and I collect those metrics, and they immediately power a dashboard or an alert that I had defined on those metrics, because I don't need to do any translation or any semantic conversion. So that to me is an amazing aspect. It's out of the box correlation, basically.
Yeah, let's take a little look deeper into that, right? You can see here, how these things are all linked together, and once you start, I actually get this complaint very regularly, Miguel, from customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
That in their observability data, just like the host name, they call it like 20 different things in their observability data, right? And how can you correlate that data together? It's like impossible, right? You'd imagine trying to join that information together. It's like if I've got 20 different ways, I'm just talking about, just the host name, for example. Like how do I correlate that? It's an impossible
It's funny
problem,
because
right?
you mentioned this, and you might think like the way that you just went like, oh, I'm trying to put it together. Actually, like that's the experience today of many SREs. They have a dashboard for a metrics system that is producing that metrics. Then they have some other dashboard for an alert, another dashboard for some traces, and then you're trying to kind of like putting them all to meet the same time window, and trying to put like some sort of ruler over it and see, okay, is this spike correlate to the metrics and the logs? When were these logs produced? So it does sound like weird, but that's actually the experience today of many of these folks.
Yeah, there's the problem there as well that you mentioned, I think is interesting and important to touch on. It's just like, when you're trying to, just like you say, correlate from a time perspective, right? Like it's the even agreeing, like you said, on the time dimensions and things like that is important to just be able to overlay this data, right? So you can actually spot, hey, there was a problem in my logs and also my metrics at the same time, right? I think when we talk about the why of OpenTelemetry, as I said, this is a very underrated aspect, but probably, in my opinion, the most important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, David, like taking a step back, like have, for example, on the landscape of observability. Remember the other day we were talking and you were mentioning something about like what the landscape looked like. Do you have any of that data on hand?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So we've been doing a lot of research recently into, what's happening with the observability
Very
industry.
handy.
Look at that. All right. Yeah. And, you can see here that people that actually, and I actually saw a post on this on LinkedIn just now, right? Was that like, the suspicion at the moment is that only maybe 10% of the data is actually driven by OpenTelemetry. You can see here that that's probably true, right? So already in production, we only have like 11%, 6% at the moment, 11%, 2026. We want to get to a place really where OpenTelemetry is the default, right? That's going to be a real huge impact on our industry, positive impact on our industry. And you can see here that the majority of customers are actually starting to evaluate and experiment with OpenTelemetry. But we really want to like push this in production number up, almost to the point where, observability data collection and observability data from an OpenTelemetry perspective is almost invisible, right? People are just doing it, right?
Yep.
What's the other interesting thing on here is even though we don't have like a huge penetration of people who are using this in production, there are a lot of people saying it's critically important, right? So there's this real like I want to say acceleration I'm seeing from customers in the industry to start pushing this harder, right?
Yeah. One question, or even like taking an angle here, like you could consider like playing devil's advocate. Like, I think that this is no lack of people wanting to do some OTel, but the reality of many folks is that like similar to Kubernetes, like everybody wants to do Kubernetes, but you still have people running mainframe or have people running on bare metal, and it's not as easy as just kind of like wanting to do something. So what do you think is holding these people back, or what are the realities that stop people from just saying like, oh, I'm just going to do OTel?
I think one of the things is that you already mentioned it, which is really interesting, is that I think we're starting to see a tipping point where the industry is using OpenTelemetry as the default data collector. So IBM have even started using OpenTelemetry to observe mainframes. We saw that AWS very recently announced that they are abandoning their Xarray agents in favor of OpenTelemetry standards. And I saw a recent announcement as well that Google are doing something similar, right? So I think as the industry powerhouses, the cloud providers, the vendors that provide mainframes like IBM start to push this more, and this has only happened in the last few months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we really are at this like tipping point where the adoption is going to start to explode, right?
That's a very good point. Very good point.
And you can see, that customers are saying that OpenTelemetry is incredibly important to their current observability strategy. We saw that quote earlier on the slide that some customers are saying we won't even talk to vendors who don't have OpenTelemetry, and you can see this here in this survey answer here. How important is it to your organization? And there's a lot of people saying it's critically or very important in here. So another interesting aspect to this is like what percentage of your IT environment is instrumented with OTel instead of a proprietary agent. And so we can see that most people are saying only between 26 and 50%. So I think we're just starting to get to the point where OpenTelemetry is going to explode over the next 12 months, in my opinion.
I mean, I see the point here is like, if someone offer me, you still need to re-instrument your applications, but would you rather do it once and for all, or keep doing it every time that you consider changing vendor? Then it's a very enticing opportunity when people have come to this decision, and also future-proofing their observability comes on the table. Like, if you are going to re-instrument something, why would you like to go with a proprietary like vendor lock-in option when you can have it with an open standard that that is not going to lock you in the longer term?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an important aspect of this. And when I talk to customers, that is something that comes up regularly. Is they say, at the end of the day, if I'm going to do a migration here, I don't want to use proprietary vendor agents anymore. I want to have something that it stands the test of time. You're kind of future proofing your observability architecture, right? Let's talk a little bit about migration paths, right? So, like, how do people get to migration? How do people migrate to OpenTelemetry? And I think an important aspect of this is actually talking a little bit about what our OpenTelemetry collector, in particular, which is like almost the centerpiece of our OpenTelemetry strategy. What does that collector actually do, right? And we're going to use Logi and Elki to help us out here. I think OpenTelemetry is there's a couple of key components in here: receivers, processors, and exporters that you can see on here. So and what they do is receivers are how we get data into our processing pipeline. Processors help us do things like tag our telemetry with additional Kubernetes tags or filtering. If we want to reduce the amount of data that's coming in, we can do that. And also applying structure to our data. If we have logs or something and we want to enrich them with like geo-IP information, we can do that sort of thing in the processor technology. And then exporters, which as part of a migration process, can be incredibly useful because we can actually ship the data to multiple backends, which can be incredibly important from a migration perspective. And this is something you just don't have this control with your existing vendor agents, right, Miguel?
Yeah, and in fact, like there is one key point that I want to clarify here. For example, the first time that I heard the component receiver in the OTel collector, my mind instantly shifted into, oh, this is just a listening endpoint or where you can push data into. But actually, the receivers could be push or pull mode. And when you have I'll give you a couple of examples. Like you have a variety of Kubernetes receivers that what they will do is they will pull the Kubernetes endpoints. And the Kubernetes metrics are exposed in Prometheus format. But what these receivers will do is they will take those Prometheus metrics from Kubernetes, they will normalize them into Kubernetes semantic conventions of OTel, and they will just push them down the OTel pipeline. In the case of another one that is a receiver that is actually listening, you have the OTLP receiver, which is an endpoint that the collector exposes where you can just send OTLP data to. There is also an exporter in this case, and this enables you to have modularity where you can chain a bunch of collectors or SDKs in a way that it just enables a lot of creative modularity to use OTel, and also the extensibility of the ecosystem that comes with having this modular architecture.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So there are some considerations there that you need to make when you think about how receivers are working in the picture here. One way that I think is important for migrations, and I've used this myself, right? If you ever heard of the strangler pattern, I really like this idea of what you actually want to do with systems is not like rip and replace everything or do a big bang. The best thing to do is to just slowly slowly migrate existing legacy systems away from the existing data collection infrastructure and move slowly to your future state architecture, right? So like just slowly taking the lowest hanging through. I think, Miguel, you actually talked a little bit about this, using doing Kubernetes first, for example, because we have some, that's a really easy thing to do. So if you have Kubernetes environments, good idea to start using OpenTelemetry in those environments, and slowly penetrate further into your architecture that way. What do you think about that, Miguel?
100%. I mean, I was touching on my intro. I talked about being very much in touch with CNCF for many years, and the the background of the OpenTelemetry project that is one of the CNCF open source projects is that it came from other CNCF projects, and the founding project of the CNCF is Kubernetes. So it's naturally a great fit for Kubernetes. So the what you're mentioning, the way to deploy is like you don't want to do big bang in this case. I think there are other cases where potentially big bang is also very, very challenging, but this is one where you want to consider those areas where you have a greater fit. So this will enable you as well to iterate, to understand better how your application pipelines, how your telemetry pipelines will work. And in fact, one thing that I also wanna say about OTel that, in my opinion, it is something that you don't wanna consider like, okay, deploying OTel is just treating it as adding SDKs everywhere or deploying collectors everywhere. You need to treat it more like an operating model. So you need to establish clear ownership conventions that you're going to use, pipelines. You need to establish cost controls. So that's where this pattern will come out very handy, because this will enable you to establish the model that you want to roll out for as you start incrementing your footprint.
Yeah, I think cost is a huge aspect. People are looking for OpenTelemetry to help with cost efficiencies, reducing data duplication and things like that. So the planning stages of this are incredibly important, right? So let's take a look at what we recommend for a reference architecture for OpenTelemetry. We can see here, there are like three main components to this. One is the OpenTelemetry API and SDK. So this is like essentially the thing that will attach to your applications and enable you to collect, application metrics, traces, and logs. And you can even now, I think, in some of the SDKs, send your logs directly without having to do anything different from a collection perspective. We also have there's a difference, right, between the gateway collector and a regular collector. Miguel, can you tell us more a little bit about that?
Sure. So on paper, it shouldn't be very different, but one thing is, I think that every SRE that is worried about their applications wants to keep anything that is running where their application's running as lightweight as possible. So we do want to have a collector on the edge. Like it is ideal. If you cannot have it, then you always have the option to send from the SDK directly. But having that collector on the edge gives you that flexibility to have to control one single flow. What you don't want to do with that collector is to start adding heavy tasks to it, like tail-based sampling or any sort of sampling, or very heavy like transformation of telemetry. Because imagine, like, if you have that collector next to your applications, that's going to impact what's happening. Like if that collector is doing tail-based sampling or is doing like heavy transformations, and that's going to eat resources from your application, and no one wants that to happen, because that's going to impact your user experience. So ultimately, we want to isolate those applications from any harm. We want to keep them very, very happy. And that's why this reference architecture as well, if you want to have a layer where you scale for ingestion, where you have centralized processing, where you have sampling, then you can have this gateway in there. Some vendors provide this as out of the box, so they will provide you like, okay, we give you an OTLP endpoint and you send whatever you want. We will scale. We will give you the facility to transform, to do sampling, but what you don't want to do is not have this sort of layer, because this means that if your observability backend is not capable of handling this, any burstiness or anything like that, then all the back pressure is going to be reflected on that collector that is on the edge, and that is going to eventually backfire into your applications, and you don't want that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, and I know this is probably, the simplest architecture, but obviously some people will put, things like Kafka in between to try and handle some of that back pressure, which I think is, an interesting architecture choice. My recommendation on that would be, like, if you don't have to introduce that complexity, you're probably better off. But it can be helpful if you have enormous volumes of data, which of course we do have a lot of customers that have that kind of thing.
Yeah, and especially the use case as well. Like it is very different. I heard, for example, from customers or users of OTel that said, we don't use Kafka. And I said, why? Because they say, well, you know what? The cost of having to manage a Kafka pipeline is higher than what will happen if we lose X amount of traces. But if you go and tell that same reasoning to someone that is handling security related logs, like activity logs, imagine telling them, oh, it's not important. You're just losing some logs from someone that accesses your systems. Yeah, that will not fly. So in those cases, yeah, that's where it depends on the durability that you want. So there is a balance that you need to find between what you want and what is the trade-off that you're going to have. We're going with one choice and another choice, and the cost as well.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we know you kind of alluded to this a little bit. We know that, a lot of vendors are actually providing their own distributions, which is kind of an interesting choice. And you get a lot of questions from customers about this, like, why, if I'm going like open source, OpenTelemetry, vendor agnostic, why would I want to bring in a vendor distribution? And I mean, it totally depends on, what you need from OpenTelemetry. But one of the things that I think huge benefit you get from a vendor distribution is you actually get, good technical support and turnaround times. If there's some kind of problem, you can actually call somebody. And that's very important to a lot of customers, right? So, I mean, the vendor distributions, I think they have a good place in the ecosystem. I think we still need a lot of customers still need that additional support to progress with their open telemetry migrations, right? And you still get all the benefits of like semantic conventions and things like that. So, and the dual shipping and all these things, you can still get all of those benefits, and then you get some good quality support, and you can turn around fixes in few days if need be, and things like that, right? Any thoughts from you, Miguel?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting topic, because I've seen two kind of like sides of the spectrum here. So, and actually, like they're probably the same goal but different angles. So some customers, they say, I will not use a vendor distribution because I want to remain agnostic. And there are some customers that say, I want something that is supported. If this thing breaks down, I want to have someone to point to, and I want you to fix it. The interesting aspect is that many times I hear people referring to OTel collector distributions as flavor, and then the upstream, like the contrib, being as vanilla. And I think that where it's clear to establish a difference here is that when someone gives you a distribution, you need to establish, are you adding any proprietary things to this? So if you're not, like, then this distribution is a distribution that you could, I mean, some people have heard using the term like pure distribution. So you're just putting components together from the contrib, because the contrib, the OpenTelemetry has two different main repos. One is the collector that is core, and the other one is the collector that is contrib. Core is just a small number of components that on their own have little value or usability because it's just an OTLP receiver, an OTLP exporter, and not much happening in between, some batching and something. But the contrib on the other side is everything under the sun. So who wants this running on production? No one, because I could get off this call and run some code and push it into contrib, and because I own one of the receiver, I maintaining one of the receivers or an exporter, and anyone in your company could just leverage this. Like, no one should be running contrib, and in fact, the community itself doesn't advise against this, and they say either you create your own distribution, which is very easily done with a tool that is called OpenTelemetry Collector Builder. You just provide a manifest and you select, cherry pick the components you want, or you use a vendor's distribution. The other aspect on agnosticity, and I will probably push very hard on this one, is I want a vendor that is comfortable with pushing OTLP from the edge. Why? Because when you're using any exporter that is vendor specific on the edge, this means that you are potentially adding that proprietary source, like translating or anything that not necessarily will work with any other vendor or any other backends that I want to push data to. So if my vendor is comfortable with me having OTLP on the edge, then that's how I guarantee agnosticity. That was the short answer.
Yeah, so if we go back to, the previous slide, you're basically sort of saying, the collector at the edge, this one, the gateway, that's important potentially to have for a vendor distribution there, but you may want to use the open source over this side, right? Miguel, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. On the edge. On the gateway, it depends. Like, if you have a vendor that gives you a managed ingest layer and they offer you an OTLP endpoint, that's it. You're set. You don't need to.
Yes.
You can do away with that gateway, and then all you use on the edge is, if you say I don't care about support, I'm comfortable with creating my own distribution, my own build, and I comfortable supporting it, then go for it. Or if you trust that what your vendor is giving you is OTel, is only adding OTel components and is not gonna drive you away from agnosticity, then you can use that as well on the edge.
Yeah. So basically, some vendors will put this gateway inside this observability solution box, which is very, very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So let's do a quick demo. I just want to show you quickly, folks, how easy it is to get started with OpenTelemetry. So here we have using Elastic because it's pretty easy to get going. But in theory, the process is very similar for any solution that you're using out there. So one of the things that we'll do quickly here is add some data, right? So you can click over here and Miguel talked about this a little bit. Kubernetes is essentially low-hanging fruit. It's well supported by OpenTelemetry. So we'll start there. And you can see here how easy it is to do, right? You just add the OpenTelemetry repository to Helm. We could put this down here and add that in. And then, it's very, very easy to get started with the OpenTelemetry operator. Now, obviously, what we do here is we are actually, I'm just going to switch to the next part of the demo, is we actually can very quickly install the operator, which will help us to essentially, add the collector and instrumentation to the demo, right? To the environment, so we can collect all of that data. So very, very quickly you can essentially just create the namespace and install the operator, and then you can instrument your applications, right? Now, obviously, one of the things that's actually happening in this environment at the moment is if we look at our applications, we can see that nothing's really showing up yet. Why is it not showing up, right? And one of the things that you need to do when you're you've got applications that you want to get information from. One of the things that you need to do is you'll see here is you need to actually add it. You need to actually add it to add the annotation. And this annotation on your Kubernetes pod will essentially make it so that the OpenTelemetry operator knows that it needs to inject the appropriate automatic instrumentation SDK so that you get traces into your observability solution and application metrics, things like response times and things like that. Right. So it's very important that you install the Helm chart, you install the operator, and then you can very quickly add the instrumentation to your applications, but you have to use the annotations, right? And then finally, I just wanted to show you, one of the things that I recommend doing with OpenTelemetry is combining this, right? So, automatic instrumentation is great, but, maybe only covers 70 to 80% of your use cases. And so what you can do is you can actually also combine automatic instrumentation with manual instrumentation, right? So in particular with Java, what I think is really nice is that you can actually use the automatic instrumentation using the annotations that I showed you. Like you annotate the pods and then the instrumentation gets applied automatically. But then also additionally to that, what you want to do is you want to add things into your code manually to enable you to get things like customer IDs and spans and things like that, right? So now we've got the annotations applied and automatic instrumentation is applied. That maybe covers like 70 to 80% of what you want from an instrumentation perspective for your applications. But what you may want to do is you may want to also, as I said, you may want to do manual instrumentation. And a really good example of why you would want to do that is if we actually look inside the main Java for this recorder application, you can see how we inject the OpenTelemetry SDK into the Java application using this particular tracer bean. And then what we can do is if we look at the trade service in here, we can actually add very easily, we can add in here to this audit customer thing, we can also capture the customer ID using OpenTelemetry, right? So if we just replace this, and we can then use the span attribute implementation from the SDK to capture the customer ID in our traces, right? You can imagine how powerful this is because now all of a sudden you can capture the customer ID and you can search for the customer ID in your traces. You can search for the customer ID even in your logs and things like that. These attributes can actually be written to all of your observability data, making it much easier to tie any issues back to your customer ID. So I recommend doing like a combination of auto instrumentation and manual instrumentation to capture that additional business context, which can be incredibly important when you're diagnosing issues, right? So what do we see working for customers, Miguel, from an OpenTelemetry perspective? You have a lot of experience with this, where you've talked to a lot of customers. What's working out?
I have seen, so I think we touched on it, which was trying, like a scope down rollout where they focus on a narrow set of teams that will potentially be a better fit to starting with OTel. So we touched on them like those that have like modern architecture types, like running Kubernetes. And once they have established the patterns of what works, what doesn't work, is enables them to roll it out further. Um, Making sure that you have a strategy and ownership is very clear. So this is not just about rolling out technology. This also needs to have an operating model in place.
Yeah, I think as I said in the demo as well, I think another thing that I've seen working out for customers is I don't think you can really get away from this kind of duality of like making sure you manually instrument, you do a better job of your logs as well, right? So instead of writing logs in raw unstructured format, you'll get better analytic capabilities if you write your logs in a structured format instead. And so I think these are things that OpenTelemetry shouldn't just be seen as kind of a panacea where you just kind of install the OpenTelemetry collector and auto instrument your applications and you're done. I think observability is a journey, and OpenTelemetry makes it easier for you to essentially rethink how you're doing observability and shift it left, right? Start putting observability into your development process, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, you cannot just assume that more telemetry will equal more insight. So you need to have good documentation for the teams that are using OTel. You need to agree on which are the standards and consistency that you're going to apply. Like the context propagation. There are a couple of good projects out there that could help the implementation of OpenTelemetry. One of them is called Weaver, and the other one is called Instrumentation Score. So these both, like the Weaver is more related to how to keep consistency in schemas, and Instrumentation Score is to help you understand how good the instrumentation that you're applying with OTel is. So it actually gives you a score at the end. So these are both really good complementary projects to the OpenTelemetry one.
Yeah, I love instrumentation score. I saw that myself. Really good way to just validate that you have you have a good handle on your observability data. I think it's fantastic. Definitely worth checking out. So I think we're ready to wrap up now. So I think if you want to learn more about OpenTelemetry, a great resource is the Observability Labs. You can go there, and Miguel's written a whole bunch of blogs in there. I've written some blogs in there. It's worth checking out. Elastic.co Observability Labs. As a major contributor to OpenTelemetry, we write a lot of stuff that is pretty applicable to any OpenTelemetry implementation. So definitely worth checking out Observability Labs, and you get can go and get some of the GitHub examples that we put together there as well, which is pretty awesome. So I think in summary, we actually covered a lot in this webinar, right? We talked about why OpenTelemetry. We talked about migration paths. I showed you quickly how to implement OpenTelemetry in your systems. We talked a little bit about what we see working with customers using OpenTelemetry. So for next steps, I think, as I said, check out the resources on Observability Labs. We also have the SRE Manager's Guide to OpenTelemetry, which is worth checking out. There's an OpenTelemetry reliability report. We talked about some of the results of that. You can go and get the full report from the Elastic website there. And SLIs and SLOs, another important aspect, for improving your reliability maturity. So that's definitely worth checking out as well. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for joining this webinar today. Miguel and I are very pleased that you joined. And if we have any questions, happy to take those. Right.
Well, thank you, Miguel and David, for the insights on OpenTelemetry adoption and planning. There's clearly a lot for teams to consider there. we're now going to move into Q&A. There's been a couple of questions that have come through. So if you haven't submitted your question yet, please drop it into the panel. But first, let's go ahead and dive into a few of these from the audience. So the first question here is, what are the pitfalls or concerns to consider when planning an OpenTelemetry rollout?
I'll take that one, David. So
Okay.
I think to begin with, you can, I think like first of all, you gotta consider like strategy and ownership. So don't treat OTel about like, okay, let's just add SDKs everywhere and the OTel collector in sprinkle with the OTel collector. This is an operating model. I think that I referred to this in a few of my comments. So you need to have clear ownership. You need to understand who owns what are the schemas that are going to be produced. Ideally, semantic conventions. How are the pipelines going to be handled? The cost controls. Is there any sampling strategy? Is there any what are the instrumentation like ideals that you want to aspire to have? And also, like architecturally, you want to make sure that you have things like the OTel collector first strategy that David mentioned is quite key. And yeah, like ideally you don't want to start customizing any of the tooling that OTel provides, because you want to make sure that as OTel evolves, you evolve with it. And David?
Yeah, I think the other thing is that a lot of these large scale IT projects can have a lot of risk and can fail, right? I think like I said, the strangler pattern is really important here. You got to essentially go slow, right? And also, one of the things that I think you really need to consider quite strongly, especially as you start to get to application observability in particular, is that if you have an existing vendor, you've got to map out the differences between what they currently provide and what you can get from OpenTelemetry, and consider how you might close any gaps that you might see. That needs to be part of your planning and considerations, because I talk to a lot of customers. They're like, we don't want to necessarily lose things, right? But everything is a trade-off, right? There are a lot of benefits to doing OpenTelemetry. I think that those benefits outweigh a lot of the risks, but you do have to consider, for example, I know one observability vendor, they store a lot of instrumentation inside their tool. How will you migrate that instrumentation over to OpenTelemetry? These are really important considerations. You don't want to be surprised, right? So I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that kind of leads us to our next question that's come in. Beyond efficiency and vendor agnosticism, what is the single most important driver for OpenTelemetry adoption?
I think, it's very interesting, because many people think about, the immediate thing that comes to mind when you talk about OTel is, vendor agnostic. That is great, but you don't really want to be changing vendors every 6 months just because you can. The whole idea, we need to remember that you want to reduce the mean time to resolution from problems. That's it. Mm-hmm. So how you do that with OTel is you make telemetry consistent and correlatable across teams and services. That's the main goal. So it's not about, it's not about being cheaper, being portable. It's when something breaks, you want to have engineers that can answer what changed, where is it failing, who is impacted, in minutes, or probably in not in hours, or you want to be able to dig down and understand the problem in the fastest way. So that to me is what I think is the driver for OTel.
Definitely. And David,
I like that. The high. Yeah, I like that actually, Miguel. That higher level view. You really have to focus on the business and the business problems that you're trying to solve. I think that's really important. Aspect to this. And I think beyond efficiency and vendor agnosticism, we talked a little bit about like semantic conventions and why those are important, and that's obviously another, I think, driver of open telemetry adoption, especially since once you get that common language, you'll find it easier to integrate tools that they'll speak the same language, and that makes integration and translation much easier if you do have a multi-tool or best of breed strategy, right?
Yeah. And if we dive in a little deeper, we actually had another question come in. Could you elaborate on the collector first strategy and how it de-risks large scale migrations?
Yeah,
Want to
sure.
take that one,
So
David?
yeah, I think the collector first strategy is, again, going back to what we talked about with the strangler pattern, right? So getting collectors in place first, they're like the powerhouses. They're the powerhouses of your everything has to flow through a collector, right? So I think putting those in place first makes perfect sense, right? You want to get and you can easily implement those on, like you say, a Kubernetes cluster, start pulling metrics and logs and things like that from Kubernetes. And then you can start to think harder about how you do the instrumentation for your applications, which in my opinion is a harder problem to solve. So, just like, go after, I know everyone hates this term like low hanging fruit, but, go after the easy stuff first. I think you'll have a much better chance of success, right?
Absolutely. Miguel, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
I think that basically you move fast by changing pipelines, not by shipping app redeploys. So that collector being just basically like SDKs generate the telemetry and the collectors make it production safe.
Finally.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, David, sorry. Do you have something else?
No, that was good.
Okay, perfect. And finally, how can organizations best leverage the OpenTelemetry context layer beyond basic tracing for deeper insights?
Yeah, I think one thing that's worth mentioning actually that we haven't mentioned yet is another really important thing about like the semantic conventions is that they have a lot of broader there's a lot of broader things going on in there. Like you also have things like CI/CD semantic conventions. You also have things like Gen AI semantic conventions that are being developed. It's very important from a semantic conventions point of view to be able to support all these like additional use cases as well, right? So I think there's an additional thing there from a semantic conventions perspective that we did talk about, but also very important for LLM observability, for integrating with your CI/CD pipelines, things that you may not even necessarily associate with observability. Those are also very important things to think about and consider.
Like David said, basically naming is hard. So you want to leverage semantic conventions as much as possible as opposed to be involved in that. I would like to add that OTel has this OTLP structure that considers certain metadata to have a special place because it does. So you don't want to treat metadata like, for example, there are things like resource attributes. Resource attributes identify entities that emit the telemetry. So you want to leverage that. If you flatten all metadata and then you don't know what is an entity, what is your VM, what is a Kubernetes node, what is a pod, then you're losing like that aspect, that concept of the entity that you are trying to take care of, and then all of a sudden everything is flat. So you want to leverage that, and you want to make sure that logs, metrics, and traces, and in the future profiling as well, which is now the fourth signal, gets correlated uniformly. So if you have the single type of correlation or a uniform type of correlation across all these signals, this will enable you to query a single entity and start getting different types of signals for the same entity.
Well, First of all, thank you to you both for a great conversation. And thanks to everyone today for the great questions. Before we wrap up, if you'd like to continue learning about OpenTelemetry, explore best practices, or see how Elastic supports OpenTelemetry-based observability, Miguel or David, I know you mentioned it before, but one more time for the audience, where's the best place for folks to go next?
Yeah, I think observability labs from Elastic is a great place to go, and then also the OpenTelemetry documentation is fantastic. I would definitely, in fact, we have people on our team who are actively contributing to the OpenTelemetry documentation. So reason I mention that is because you can be sure that it's well written, right, and it's resourced by people who are absolutely top class in their industry, right.
Yeah, and if you don't like, or you think something could be better, you're welcome to contribute. Like that's the other concept about OTel, that it's not just some people writing something for you. Like eventually, if you think like, oh, actually this could be improved, anyone is welcome to contribute to OpenTelemetry.
Well, thank you again to you both,
right.
and to our audience. Thank you for spending the time with us today. We hope this session gave you a clearer path forward for planning and adopting OpenTelemetry within your organization. On behalf of DZone and Elastic, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you at a future session. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.